Check, 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 check. we'll give it. All right, why don't I go ahead and get started, and hopefully Crystal will join us here momentarily. So I want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. I just want to remind everyone this is a remote meeting and teleconference using Zoom pursuant to 1 MRSA section 403-A. I'm going to welcome everyone to Sanford's Planning Board May 20th, 2020 meeting. The meeting will come to order. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are offered. Please notify the chair if you are unable to hear or see something. The board works from a prepared agenda and will consider tonight's agenda in the following order. 1, new business file 14-20-R, Sanford Safe Storage LLC. And number 2, old business file 03-19-R, R. Pepin and Sons, Inc., care of Matthew Pepin. Please know that if any planning board members have potential conflicts of interest of which they are aware, they will disclose the conflict prior to the board initiating a hearing or action on an application. Planning board decisions are based solely on whether an applicant has provided sufficient evidence to meet the requirements of local, state, and federal laws. After board votes on the merits of each project, it will vote on written findings of fact. Since the findings may substantially affect any appeals rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attending the meeting not leave until the board has adopted the findings for the project you're interested in. After the planning board makes its final decision, any reconsideration by the board must be made at the next regularly scheduled meeting. If anyone wishes to appeal the board's final decision, he or she must do so within 30 days. Please note that the planning board members, the city's ordinances and comprehensive plan are available for viewing at the city's website. And the meeting agenda and materials related to specific, you can find the meeting agenda and materials related to a specific project by finding the links in the abutter notice or on the homepage of the city's website under public notices at stanfordmaine.org and following Zoom login directions. So with that, we will need a roll call, please, Beth.
Yes. Jace Clark.
Here.
Diane Connolly.
Present.
Lenny Hoare.
Present.
Jack McAdam.
Here.
Tom Morgan.
Here.
Crystal Tenney. Crystal appears not to be here at this point in time. Jennifer Georgia.
Here. So it sounds like we do have a quorum, even though we are missing Crystal. So we'll go ahead and proceed then. So let's move to the minutes. I don't know if there are any revisions that were needed to the minutes that were included in the packet for approval today.
Madam Chair.
If so, yes.
There were no minutes included in this packet.
Why did I think I saw some? Maybe it was last, I don't know, maybe I was looking at an old agenda thinking it was minutes.
Because
okay,
I think
my apologies. I'm sorry, Jace, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say it's because there was on the file for the
planning board packet, there was one file that was labeled minutes, but it was just the current agenda.
Okay, that probably is what messed me up. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, sorry about that. So why don't we move into new business file 14-20-R, Sanford Safe Storage, LLC. I do want to just clarify the process before we hop into that real quick. And I just want to note that how we'll handle this going forward is Beth will provide an update on the application, and we'll go through it section by section. So the applicant will have up to 20 minutes to make your presentation at the beginning, and then we will take it through each subject area. Beth will provide us a quick update on those on that subject area, and then the applicant will ask you as well if there is any, a brief statement that you would like to make in reference to that topic area as well. So following the applicant's statement, our participant manager, Molly, will unmute the applicant to speak. And then after the applicant's statement, the planning board will deliberate on each item uninterrupted. So I want to call out that the applicant won't be able to speak during deliberation time of the board unless we call on someone to answer a specific question or clarify anything. So we'll move to each subject area and the process will be repeated. Are there any questions on that before we hop in? I apologize, I was stumbled a little bit there, my word. Okay, so with that then, Beth, I don't know if you want to introduce us to this item before the applicant, or should we have the applicant provide their...
I'll do a brief introduction just to orient the board. So Sanford Safe Storage is in front of you this evening seeking an amended site plan approval. As the board knows, you've had 2 meetings with the applicant about concerns about the what was installed for the landscape plan being significantly different than what was approved. In addition, Mike Casserly, the assistant city engineer, has provided an inspection report detailing several elements of construction that are not in compliance with the approved plan, including a series of things, including fencing, replacement of grass with wood mulch, steeper slopes in a couple of places, replacement of underground propane tanks with above ground tanks and sited in a different location, a 34-foot rather than a 24-foot wide driveway, expanded pavement for parking area. Mike referenced damage from snow storage that appears to have resolved itself. And then the variation in the landscape plan. So that's my introduction. I know the applicant is here to make a presentation. Once we're done with that, I'd be happy to go back and provide a little more detail on each of those areas.
Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that, I will ask the applicant if you would please state your name and address, and then go ahead and proceed with your presentation. I just wanted to remind you, you have up to 20 minutes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. First off, I'd like to thank the board for tolerating the whole situation. This shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't come back to the board with these changes, but they were changed. We brought the changes up to Jamie when we were going through occupancy and let him know. I didn't realize, having not been to the last meeting and the approval, just how sensitive it was. I've been doing construction for 35 years. Most of the changes are pretty small. I think when we're done and Beth tells you, hopefully you'll find that way. But the major thing is the landscaping. And I made I've stated and showed you what I did and not what I didn't do. And then I made an attempt to dress the plan up a little bit more, and I came for your advice. And I think I understood that you'd like a little more, so I hired Kylie Mason from Sebago Technics. And this is the third attempt before I start. I want to get your approval, obviously, to please the board on how we've dressed up our site. I know that it's considerably less. I think now it's considerably more than I originally proposed. Part of the reason I didn't do what I said I was going to do is it wouldn't have survived on the slopes. Hindsight, I don't look that good in what I did, but that is the reality. That's all I have to say. I like to think that I've gone the extra mile. Hopefully you all think that, but I can't control personal opinions. So I leave it to the board to tell me if I'm there or I need to do more. I hope I've done what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know until I hear you deliberate. So I won't take up any more of your time with my talk.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so then, Beth, why don't we start in on each of the topic areas, and I'll let you kind of introduce each one to us, please.
Okay, so fencing was installed in different locations and indicated on the approved plan in multiple places. The applicant has indicated that it views fencing as a security issue. The board, the ordinance anticipates fencing as more than a security issue. It's also a screening, filtering, and an aesthetics issue. The variations ranged from moving the fence 30 feet closer to Cottage Street, making it more visually prominent, with some smaller adjustments in other locations. I would say the other significant relocation is the relocation of the fence from the bottom of the slope to the top of the slope, and the applicant has provided an explanation in that the fencing consultant was suggesting that it would create a situation where wildlife could potentially jump the fence and get into the interior of the facility. Let me see what else should be said there. So it ranged from those two large changes to a number of smaller ones. I'll let the applicant indicate why he chose to relocate those himself, but this basically just provides the summary of the topic area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything you would like to add? No?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Yep,
Okay,
can hear you.
When I was going through the fence, H.A. Stone, who's been my fence for over 25, 30 years, I've known the boys since I was a kid, they started telling me, Greg, you don't want to put your fence here because the deer will jump over. And when they get in there, there'll be a problem. And so a lot of changes were done by them, and just the lay of the land. You know, you lay it out when you're going through, when you're putting it on paper. Then when you get down there, like, you know, there was on the slope, I hit a stream, you know, like a spring, so I had to put a pipe in. You know, you can't plan on everything. So that's all I have to say. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't meant to do anything wrong. I've never had that question before in all 6 facilities I've built. So, and I've changed all of them. So I know that doesn't make it right, but that's my answer.
Thank you. Okay, so why don't we open it up to the planning board for discussion then? I don't know, should we take it one by one, or I don't know what the board's thoughts are, if we kind of would prefer to kind of jump in with any comments or questions, discussion item. Should we handle it one by one?
That's the general protocol that was approved by the board. If you're going to do it alphabetically the way that we had talked about before,
Yes,
I'll
please.
read
let's
off
do
your
it that way.
name, and then if you don't have any comment, just say no comment. Jace,
No comment.
Diane,
Yes, I have one comment to make. I'm not liking the barbed wire at the top. That wasn't part of the original approval. And all my concerns are with the wildlife. If they do decide to scale a 6-foot fence, they're going to get caught in that barbed wire, and we're going to have one heck of a mess. I would like to ask the applicant if he put barbed wire on any of his other storage places before I continue.
May I answer that?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, every one of them. It's storage is the perception of safety, and everyone likes that. And the only worry where they were worried about the deer jumping on the fence was on the left side of the property where that big slope is. That's why I put it up on the top, so they couldn't jump onto the top of the fence. That's why Stoney said that. He goes, if we put it at the bottom of the slope, they can jump into it. If we put it on the top, they're not going to. So that's why that was changed.
Okay, but I'm wondering because is there anything that you plan on putting in the area of the storage unit itself that would prompt a deer to want to get in there and eat something?
No, ma'am. It's just that they thought they would come in.
Yeah.
Through their experience, you know. I don't.
Okay. Madam Chair, if I can direct a comment, I'm not a big fan of that barbed wire at all. It wasn't approved in the original approval of the plans. My personal thought about it is I don't like it aesthetically, and I'd like to see it removed. That is all. Thank you.
Okay.
okay, the next person would be Lenny.
Did I lose Lenny?
Lenny, did we lose you?
I think Lenny might have dropped out. I don't see him here on the oh, there he is. I don't see any audio feature. He might have dropped the call.
Why don't we go to the next person? Oh, there he is. Okay.
Oh, there.
No comment right now.
Okay, the next person is Jack.
Yeah, it's true that a deer can clear a 6-foot fence, but I don't see them jumping a fence to get into a storage area because there's nothing there to eat. But he's moved the fence already, so I don't know what we can do about that.
Is that it? Shall I go on to the next person?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Tom?
So it's not, I mean, the concerns or the changes, it seems like there's a considerable justification that went into what changes were made. I guess my biggest concern would be the fact that all of these changes were made and then returning to get permission to have made the changes that were already made. So just a consideration for the fact that we have a process for requesting changes, and it would save a lot of time on this end. But I don't have any concern with the changes necessarily. I'm all set.
Okay, and then Jennifer.
I guess I would echo what you just shared, Tom, for sure. And then additionally, my concern, similar to Diane's, is, the fencing is not, the barbed wire wasn't part of that approval. Is that necessary? Is it aesthetically pleasing? I don't really think so, in my opinion. But does it provide a sense of safety for the customers? Perhaps it does. But I guess I'm stuck on the fact that the changes were made before going through the amendment process. I don't have anything else at this point, I guess.
Jennifer, do you want to provide a summary, or do you want to just move on to the next topic?
I guess I'll do my best to summarize, and please, if any one of the members of the board feels I stated it incorrectly, please speak up and let me know. But from what I heard, there was not a lot of comment except for obviously the fact that the fencing was not approved. As it stands today, it was approved for something different. That is concerning the board, and another concern of the board was the barbed wire at the top of the fence, and with some board members would like to see that removed. Did I miss anything?
I think that's
Madam Chair, it's Diane. May I add a comment?
Sure.
It's something else. There are cameras in the storage unit areas, is there not? Security cameras?
Would the applicant please confirm that, please?
Yes, ma'am, there is.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's an added security feature there. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic area, if there's not anything else on that one.
Yep. So the next topic area is changes in surface treatment. Grass was replaced with wood mulch along the entire side slope that's between the fence at the top of the slope and the bottom of the slope. Obviously, with the intent to reduce maintenance requirements, would be pretty tough mowing that slope. And there were other areas in the site where grass was replaced with bark mulch as well. The recommendation from staff was that applicants should identify where those locations are on the plan, so that the board is aware of where they are, and discuss the impacts of changes on the overall aesthetics of the site and the potential impact on stormwater quality. I'm thinking, Molly, if there's any chance, Greg, if you can't do this, Molly, is there any chance you could put the two plans up so that the board could have a sense, or at least the plan, proposed amended plan, so that the applicant could indicate where the places are where grass has been replaced with wood mulch in places other than that large side slope.
I will pull it up now. The proposed landscape plan, you said yes?
The proposed amended site plan, which may be the landscape plan, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think there were two of them.
This is it, correct?
I believe so. Is there another one that was the amended site plan?
What I have is the approved plans, the existing plans, and then the proposed plan.
Okay, then that's on this plan. So I don't know, Greg, whether you can describe where those locations are, where you went from grass to mulch.
Where they are, and again, I've done this a few times, it's stump grindings, which are used by the DEP for this purpose. And I knew it'd be difficult to mow the property on that side. So on the left-hand side, probably 125 feet back, it starts. It goes to the back of the paved area and then circles around to about 50 feet from the end where the detention pond is, and that's all grass. And the rest is all grass. It's only the areas that have been difficult to mow and difficult to stabilize the grass. So I put stump grindings in, which I called Sebago and made sure they would be approved by the DEP. So, again, that was not meant to make me be here, you know. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So why don't we open it up to the board then for comment and discussion?
So Jace is the first person?
Yeah, I don't really have too much of an issue on this. You don't really know the site conditions until you start digging. I don't have any issues with the mulch in the other areas because mowing on such slopes is dangerous. So, I mean, I have no issues with the mulch whatsoever.
Okay.
That's it.
Second?
I have no issues.
Lenny?
Are there any issues with water quality with the runoff with this?
Greg, perhaps that would be something that you could speak to?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I called Sebago and asked them that before I did it. And they said no. And if you've all been to the site, it's so stabilized, it looks great. I mean, that's out of the 6 sites I have, that's the most stabilized site. It looks as good as the day I did it 2 years ago.
Lenny, did that answer your question?
I guess, did Mike have any concerns with that?
Mike, are you
May I
there?
speak? Yes, I am,
Please.
if I may.
Thank you.
I don't see any specific issue. It certainly makes you wonder and ask the question, and that's the applicant did good to do that, I think. And I don't see any significant issue, and it's, in my opinion, it's comforting to hear that from the engineering company. They also made that statement. Perhaps we might want that in writing, I don't know, but it would make sense to me if that were the case.
Thank you. Anything else from you, Lenny?
No, all set.
Okay.
Jack?
Nothing.
Tom?
I have no issues.
And Jennifer?
I don't have any comments. No.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the summary is pretty clear?
It sounds as it is. Yep. Unless anyone.
Madam Chair?
All right.
It's Mike.
Mike,
May
yes.
I ask a question?
Hi, Mike. Please.
Yes. Question, if I may.
Yes, please.
In my packet, I received an estimate for landscaping. The amount here was $16,500. I thought I heard that there might have been some more information on that. But my question is, does the planning board want a performance guarantee for the installation of the landscaping? And if so, we'd have to just be sure we'd have the right amount projected in the guarantee. Since there's no certificate of occupancy, it's often a good question to ask when there's no occupancy permit to be sort of leverage, if you will. And So that, in theory, that makes the applicant motivated to finish that site work.
Okay. Beth, I'm guessing, will there be another, maybe when we talk about the landscape plan, would that be a good area to make sure we discuss the performance guarantee?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you for bringing it up, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, you ready to move on to the next one?
Yes, please.
Next one is slopes. So the slope on the southwest corner of the site and the entire side slope, as we discussed that, are not constructed to the approved site plan. In some cases, a slope of 2-1 was constructed, where 3-1 was approved. The applicant indicated that the changes are related to the relocation of the fence and the lack of installation of landscaping at the top of the slope due to the discovery of ledge during construction.
Thank you. Greg, is there anything you would like to add to this topic?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we open it up to the board then?
Okay, so Jace would be the first person.
Still no issue with that topic, just because the mulch kind of took care of that. The previously approved slopes were intended to be mowed, so they made sense, but now that they are mulch, I don't have an issue with the slope.
Diane?
I only have a statement to make that if ledge was discovered at the time, a phone call should have been made. Other than that, I don't have an issue. Thank you.
Lenny?
No comment.
Jack?
What side are we talking about? Southwest is confusing me.
I want to get back to my comment. Where is it?
Because the slope's on the northeast side, right?
Well, the big slope is on the northern side, and apparently there were some additional slopes. If you go back to the summary of, actually, I don't know where they are. Mike might be, since it came from Mike's inspection report, he might be able to identify that area a little more clearly.
I'm not sure where you're referring to, but I can tell you that if you stood at the gate and looked to the right, northwest is kind of diagonally to the left. So if I were thinking of the back of the site, that would be the southeast. And I didn't catch the first reference, so I hope you can glean it from there. The front is generally west. The right side of the back is generally the east or southeast, northeast actually.
Jack, does that help?
But the slope we're talking about is on the north side. Is that correct?
Well, there's at least two areas. There's the slope on the north side, which is that big elevation change that you see when you're coming into town. Somebody needs to mute themselves. Could somebody who's on this call please mute themselves so we don't hear the background noise? Thank you. So the northern slope is that big change in slope that goes from the church property to this property down to where the units are. So that's one area. The other area,
the top of the sheet.
The top of the sheet. Molly, if you can show your cursor there, if you're not tied up doing other stuff. So that area is the area that's at the north. I think the southwest is, if you go to the bottom of the sheet and to the right, back further there, going even further back, like right in there, I think is what was referred to in the inspection report. Mike, does that ring any bells for you?
minor changes at that point. What I saw were changes in the slopes to the right side, generally east, and the top of the sheet, which is generally north for slopes.
Okay. Jack, does that answer the question for you?
Yeah, somewhat. I guess I don't have an issue with it.
Okay. Tom?
No issues.
Jennifer?
I don't have any issues either. So I think we have a consensus there as well.
Okay, good. So the next topic area then is the propane tank. They were originally proposed to be underground, and the applicant placed them above ground and relocated them so that they would be less visible. And Molly is sort of circling the area where they were relocated to. That's just my general introduction. I don't know if Greg's got something to say.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't recall. I know that we had a drain going that we had to put in to the swale from the spring that we had on the left side of the site with the bark mulches and the heavy slope. But I didn't think it was an issue. Apparently it is. I know I say that, but that's all I can comment on. I didn't mean that to be a problem.
Chase?
Yeah, I don't really have too much of an issue with that. Someone could always have installed an above ground tank wherever they wanted after, the project's been built and approved and everything's gone by. I don't see an issue with it.
Diane?
No issue.
Lenny?
Just a question, is city gas available in that area?
I don't
No.
believe so.
Not.
Okay.
Okay, Jack?
No issue, but I guess if they were put underground, they'd be less visible too.
Tom?
No issues.
Jennifer?
I don't have any comments or issues on this either. I guess I take that back. My only comment would be similar to Jack. Leaving the tanks underground would have left them less visible than above ground. But it sounds like we're all in consensus on this topic area as well.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. It appears that Diane has her hand raised. Diane, do you have something to say?
Okay, please go ahead, Diane.
Thank you. I slightly remember at one of the other meetings when we were discussing the natural gas. It was my understanding that the applicant was setting up for it when it was coming down Cottage Road. Am I correct? To be switched over later?
No, ma'am, but
Greg,
if it does come, I will hook up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hooked up in my office, so.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, should we move to the next topic then, Beth? I think we're on that one.
The next one is the width of the driveway. So the driveway was proposed at 24 feet. It was constructed at 34 feet. I'll let the applicant explain why they chose to do that. What I'd like to put in front of the board is the fact that the ordinance limits the width of a commercial driveway to 26 feet. Does provide the authority for the planning board to grant a waiver under two conditions. One, that it's necessary to accommodate turning lanes, And the second is if the volume of traffic is such that it would justify this. I think it probably is appropriate at some point to ask Mike to comment on this. There's a couple of things I'd suggest the board talk about. First is whether, what their concerns are. Obviously, Greg is going to talk about why they did this. And then if there are concerns that are raised by the board and or their willingness to grant a waiver, before you go too far down the path of granting a waiver, however, the applicant does need to go on record documenting why that waiver is necessary. It's best if it's done in writing. It wouldn't be horrible for it to be verbal this evening, but a follow-up should probably be in writing. And then it would be appropriate, I think, to ask Mike whether the justification that the applicant offers is reasonable based upon his reading and interpretation of the ordinance and those two provisions.
Thank you, Beth.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, is there anything you'd like to add on to regarding this topic?
I will just add that it works well, and the reason I did it was pure ignorance. If I had known, I shouldn't have done it. I think it works good in and out, but again, that's all I say. I have no other comment to say than ignorance. I put myself on the board.
Okay, thank you. So let's open it up to board discussion then.
Chase?
I don't have too much issue with it. I'm not opposed to granting a waiver.
Okay. Sorry, I'm taking notes as we're doing this. Diane?
I just want to ask a clarifying question. Maybe Mike Casserly can chime in with the answer. Was it 24 feet was to accommodate the fire truck, the WB-50? Is that correct?
Madam Chair, if I may, no, 24 feet is the, I think that was the distance, the width allowed by the curb cut permit. In this part of Sanford, the curb cut permit is allowed by Maine DOT. They have jurisdiction on that part of Route 202. 26 feet, and I'm going by memory on this, is the limit for commercial. So I may have those backwards. I'm sorry for that confusion, but those are the two things. And the cities will allow as much as 30 feet, and yet the applicant's width is 34 feet. So in any one of those scenarios, those three scenarios, the 34 feet is greater than all of them.
Okay. My next question, I guess, would be the applicant. Is there any foreseeable in the future for transport trucks having to get in there?
No, ma'am, we discourage that. There's no reason to have big trucks in there. And very rarely do we ever see any big trucks in there. And also.
All right, then my comments would be, I'm just not in favor of the waiver. Again, just going ahead, making it 34 feet. I think that's a little much. Thank you.
Lenny.
Hi, yeah, I guess my concern with this is we are potentially granting approval for something that was done after the fact. I think, is this information stated on the permit? When they pull the permits, is this clearly indicated how wide or how much width they're allowed?
The applicant is given a copy of the approved plan after it's approved and signed by the planning office. So they proposed 24 feet. That's what they were approved for.
I guess my concern is that, we're letting something go after the fact. I think maybe there should be I guess that's just my main concern, I guess, is that we're just granting after the fact approval for something that wasn't done right to begin with.
Okay, Jack?
I guess the question for Mike, so Maine DOT says 26 feet, and you said the city can go to 30 feet. Can we override Maine DOT?
Good question. I probably not. I mean, without a change from them. I'm not familiar with their waiver process. Usually they grant what they grant and they expect that to be built.
Well, I guess I'd go with whatever Maine DOT says. If it's 26 feet, he's got to take some out.
So our specific, I think Mike knows the DOT process better, but the ordinance very specifically limits the curb cut to 26 feet, does allow a waiver provision up to, and it's probably 30 feet, what Mike was quoting, but you have to still, the applicant still has to provide justification before the planning board can grant that waiver. I don't know about you, but I did not hear justification in Greg's presentation.
May I speak?
Please.
It's whatever you want, 24, 26, that's fine. I'm not gonna argue about that. It was one of those things the guys did, they graded, marked it out to pave. I didn't check it just to make sure that it was to code. I'm at fault. Whatever you want, 24, 26, it does not matter. It works good now, but if you guys don't like it, and I understand what you're doing if you make a precedent, and so I would be worried about that as a board member too.
Jack, did you want to offer anything before we go to Tom?
Nope.
Okay. Tom?
I guess I don't have too much of a concern over it, although we are looking at two different requirements, ours and the state. Getting clarity on that, although looks like we're way over on both. So, yeah, I guess I could lean both directions on that, whether we force it back to within or if there is more information, provide more justification for a waiver, I would consider that as well.
Jennifer?
My comment would be that I can't see justifying a waiver based on the fact that he didn't know. And I guess I would be leaning in the direction of what he was approved for in the original, and I can't justify the waiver, honestly, unless there's some other compelling reason that hasn't been shared.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Lenny has his hand raised. Lenny, do you have something to say?
Please go ahead, Lenny.
Yeah, just does the contractor who did this work bear any responsibility for this?
That's a good question,
Typically,
Greg. I don't know if. Oh,
typically, it's the landowner that's responsible to ensure that their contractor understands what the requirements of the approved plan are. The city doesn't usually get in between two private entities.
I'm just thinking where we have a contractor who probably has done this work before, I would hope that they would be aware of some of the regulations that go with that.
yeah.
As I said, we
Okay.
normally don't put ourselves in between a private contractor and the person they're working for.
Madam Chair, I agree with that.
Okay, so it sounds like we're a little split on this topic. I don't know if you got the same sense, Beth, based on the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be able to give some clear direction.
May I make a suggestion?
Please do.
Try that again. The minimum width of that driveway is 34 feet. There's a large area that flares out towards Cottage Street and an area that kind of flares into what is on the plan with the driveway, and that is a couple of parking spaces. So at the street, it's actually significantly wider than 34 feet. By our conventions between the code officer and myself, we consider the width of a driveway the narrowest area, and that's usually in the case of a long, narrow driveway, kind of along the sides. In this case, it really didn't have a side. It had a round entrance. If you came from the Sanford side and took a right, there's a round section of pavement that comes in on a circular path, and then at its narrowest, with the other side, that's 34 feet, and then it widens out again. So then it becomes kind of a parking area. And perhaps to help you understand what it looked like before and what it could look like again, perhaps a revised plan could be provided for this issue. And that way you could see what's going on.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah. I guess I have one more quick question for you, Mike, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the waiver process? Does the justification seem reasonable to you to keep it the way it is?
One thing it does, having the driveway turn out the way it did, is it does add some impervious area. It's not a real lot, but it's some. And I just think that if there's a waiver to a smaller amount, say commercial could be as much as 26 feet, and that there is a citation here in the bottom of the sheet we're looking at, chapter 20-14-5.3. Commercial curb cut is limited to 26. And the applicant could make that and without a waiver, and that would be more than the 24, and then just get a shape that is more aligned towards not having such a wide open, unless the applicant can justify that. The street side, as I said, was very wide. If the board wishes to grant a waiver, they could perhaps go a little maybe down to 30 feet, if the code allows that, and then just reshape that so you don't have this ridiculous amount of paving at the edge of pavement of Cottage Street. I hope that's clear, but you could narrow it up some and still grant a waiver for the amount that it was supposed to be.
Okay.
The code limits it to 26 feet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's 8 feet more than the maximum. And you could maybe suggest to the applicant that he kind of work this so he meets you in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Does the board want to continue to discuss more, or do you want to move on to the next topic?
I was just going to ask, were there any other comments or questions or thoughts on this topic?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Jack McAdam has his hand raised. Jack, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I'd like to check with Maine DOT to see if we can, how far we can go with this. I'm confused on this. We can go to 26 feet, or Maine DOT says 26, and Mike says we can go up to 30, but can we?
Jack, I'm going to stand up and get my book, and I'm back in 5 seconds.
Perhaps we could go on to the next topic while Mike's doing that.
Okay, prior to doing that, Diane Connolly also has her hand raised.
Okay.
Just a quick comment, if I may. If DOT says 26, the city says we can go to 30. I'm leaning towards 26. I'll grant a waiver for that, but nothing more. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we move on while Mike is getting that information.
Okay. So the next topic is changes in impervious cover and water quality. And this is actually probably something we want Mike's attention on as well. So the wider driveway and the expanded pavement for parking increases the impervious cover over what was approved. The applicant, and as Mike pointed out, it's not an excessive amount, but the applicant has not provided updated information about the change in the amount or percent of impervious cover on the plan, and how it relates to the 35% limit on impervious cover in the Mausam Watershed Overlay District. Realistically, it's probably not going to come close to that 35% limit because it is a large site and a significant amount of it is not being proposed for development. However, the data itself should at least be updated on the plan is our recommendation. Mike also ended up making comments that the applicant should be required to provide a statement signed by an engineer registered in the state regarding changes in the stormwater system, and request documentation about whether the proposed modifications trigger the need for an amended stormwater permit from DEP. So I think that the suggestion is, rather than threefold: one is get the right numbers on the plan. Secondly, get the engineer from Sebago Technics to provide its statement about whether he believes there are changes in the stormwater system. And the third is to request documentation from DEP to speak to that issue about whether an amended permit is required.
Thank you, Beth. Greg, anything you would like to add to this topic?
No, ma'am, I would agree with all that. That's all fine. I will do that. And we don't need to talk about the curb cut. I'll just reduce it to 24 feet. Done.
Okay. Thank you. I think Mike was back. I don't know if before we hop into planning board comments on the changes to impervious cover, if there was that update you wanted to look up real quick, Mike, regarding Maine DOT.
Well, actually, the question I thought it was asked was, is there a waiver allowed? The code doesn't give you any allowance, any allowance for reducing the width or increasing the width above what the limits are. I won't say that that's never happened, but the code doesn't say that. So if we're sticking to the code, which we like to do, we would not allow a waiver. And I think my take on the stormwater permit is there is a definite impervious area triggering that caused that, and the next level up is very much higher. My recommendation was just to get that assurance and with a stamp letter from a professional engineer and answer that question for us as to whether an additional permitting might be needed.
Do you want to start in with the board comments at this point?
Yes, please.
Jace?
No issues with what was said.
Diane?
No issues with what was said.
Lenny?
I don't have any issue with what was said. Just a comment. If he reduces the size of the driveway, he's reducing the size of the impervious cover. So is this a moot issue?
Yep. Well, I guess we'll see once they run those numbers. It may very well be a moot issue.
I have no issue.
Thank you, Jack. I couldn't get there. I'm trying to write. Tom, are you the next one? Yes.
Yes, I have no issues.
And Jennifer?
I would agree that I don't have any issues because I'm also thinking about the fact of if he scales back the driveway, the amount of impervious cover will also be reduced. I would like to say, though, that agreeing with the point that was raised that the correct percent coverage should be reflected on the plans, whatever that ends up to be, based on any changes to the driveway or anything like that.
Excuse me, before we move forward, I have a hand raised from Jack.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
Oh, I must have hit the wrong button, sorry.
Oh. Okay, why don't we move then? Yes, please.
Okay. So the next item is the landscape plan. I'm going to move my phone around here. I did want to point out that there was no written description of the changes between the approved plan and the proposed amended plan. The planting schedule that is associated with the proposed amendment is incomplete. There's a partial schedule listed at the top of the plan, but the two garden areas are not included in that. In addition, the size information is I'm sorry if I'm being a bit obtuse here, but I didn't understand what number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on through number 5 was intended to mean in terms of the size of the plant material. Oftentimes for those kinds of plants, what you see them referred to is in the size of the number of gallons, if you will, that the plant pot holds. In this particular case, and I originally thought when I looked at it, number 1, number 2, that that's what they were talking about, but when it just continued to go up consecutively up to 5, I started questioning what they were trying to communicate. Let's see, it would be good, I think, for the applicant to indicate why it didn't install the improved landscape plan along the frontage of the property. I think that they've provided reasonable explanation for why they didn't put the landscaping in at the top of the slope with the discovery of the ledge. The last issue, general issue, is that when we were going through the review process, somebody needs to mute themselves, please. Either that or you're going to hear my dog barking and I won't mute him. When the application was being reviewed, the consultant indicated that a vague statement about thinning of trees on the southern side of the driveway. When he was asked to clarify at the next meeting, he indicated that no trees were going to be removed from that area. In fact, there were trees removed from that area. And then CMP came in and removed at least one more tree that was within the public right-of-way. And the city can't control what CEP does in a situation like that. However, it would be good, I think, to have an understanding of what was going on in terms of the applicant. In my analysis, I broke out the assessment of the landscape, the changes in the landscape plan based upon several sort of breakdowns. The first was at 4 different areas. The first is the area that's west of the driveway, or heading further into town. And in general, there's a pretty significant decrease in the number of trees, but also a dramatic increase in the number of shrubs and perennials. The general observation about that piece of the design is that even though you're seeing a lot more going in there in terms of shrubs and perennials, those tend to be fairly low plants. They'll be quite attractive, I've no doubt. However, they will not perform the screening or filtering of the views of the westernmost corner and the frontage of the building. You've also lost the strong anchor at the edge of the driveway and parking area. The trees were replaced with very low shrubs and perennials again. Let's see. The area immediately east of the driveway it replaces what had originally been proposed as a zigzag pattern of trees that was not done in the area west of the driveway. They kept just a single linear placement of the trees. When you go immediately east of the driveway, the zigzag starts reappearing, which provides some of that filtering and screening that was intended to view that building. The planting bed again is low, and you lose that anchoring of the edge of the driveway. I have to say that there are 2 polygons with sort of a honeycomb pattern, but there's no description on the plan and no description in the legend as to what that symbol means. It would be good to know what's intended there. And I would say in a revised plan that they clearly should indicate what that symbol means so that we understand it. Then if you continue to head a little bit further north, so it's the area that's closer to the intersection of the front and side property lines, you'll see that in general there, again, they've gone back to a zigzag pattern of trees and shrubs in that area. And that particular portion of the landscape plan, I think, does a reasonable job filtering and screening the view of the building for travelers that are heading west on Cottage Street. And then the last is the area at the top of the slope. As I said, they propose to eliminate that entirely because of the discovery of ledge. I did give you sort of a summary of the landscape schedule, as well as sort of detail of it. You can see which pieces are missing in the planting schedule. But then I provided a side-by-side comparison, breaking it down by trees, shrubs, and perennials, so that you have a sense of what's going on. And I did, in doing this analysis, give you a footnote that made it clear that when you saw it going from 35 trees to 18 trees, overall on the site plan, that if you subtract out the ones that were at the top of the slope, which was 12 trees, you've got 23 trees that are still 23 versus the 18 that were proposed. So I did want to just remind the board, as they're thinking about this, that there are 3 primary purposes for the landscape plan. The first is to provide an attractive street frontage for the traveling public and to screen, filter views of the proposed building from Cottage Street. The second is to provide that evergreen buffer between the church and the development to screen the view of the commercial structures when the deciduous trees had shed their leaves. And the board specifically raised that issue in one of the previous conversations with the applicant, and the applicant went to those individuals, the owners of the adjacent property, and they basically said they're not concerned about the loss of that buffer. And then the third purpose was to provide an environmental buffer for the stormwater that was directed down the side slope on the northern portion of the site. And I think that, should DEP come back and say they're not concerned, or, depending on those other 2 elements that I was seeking under the last issue, a statement from their engineer that this would not be a significant loss in the water quality treatment would be adequate. That's pretty much what I have to say on this topic.
Thank you, Beth. Greg, is there anything you would like to speak to regarding this topic?
Yeah, this is why I don't represent myself, because I'm going to say some things tonight. I started on this when I got approved, when I was going for site plan. I told Jamie what happened. I went to the planning board and I started trying to get this all approved a year and a half ago, but I was ignored and not met with to address this. I'll tell you what, I'll put the landscaping that was approved, I'll rip everything out with the landscaping that was approved, and we'll end it right there. It was a smart move to not do it, and I'm putting more money into it now to try to please the board, to show them I will respect to the board that I made a mistake. But I did not try to avoid doing the landscaping. I came to Jamie the day I did it, told him what I did, told him I'd rectify it, and there's more money into it than was originally done. And now I feel like I'm screwing the town or some way. Okay, I graduated from Sanford High. I'm the largest metal building dealer in New England. Okay, and I've never been treated like this. Ransacked. This is not right. This is not right. So I'll tell you what. You go ahead and do what you want, but I'll put the plans that were approved, and they'll die because they're on the slope, and they're not right. I'm very upset, and I shouldn't be in this situation. Beth, I'm sorry. This has taken way too long. I'm frustrated. And, with the planning board, with the bond, I'm going to do it because the bank wants it done. I want to do that. I wanted to do this last year. Okay? And I can produce emails that I tried, but it was too busy. The planning department was too busy. I called there 5 times the last 2 days. Never got picked up.
Okay, excuse me.
To get a call. I'm sorry.
Okay, you need to please tone it down. Thank you.
And you tell me what you want. I'm very upset, and I shouldn't represent myself. I should have let Sean do it. We had 2 other meetings tonight, and this is my home. I grew up in Sanford and Springdale, and it almost makes me feel like you think I'm trying to make it look like shit. I'm sorry.
Okay, no vulgarity, please. So with that, I think it's time for the board to deliberate, and
Right.
why don't we start with Jason?
You put a memo together what you want.
Excuse me, that's enough. Thank you very much, Greg. Beth, let's let the board deliberate, please.
Chase?
Well, the way I look at the landscaping is with looking at what's going to be put in place. Would I have approved it originally had that been the plan? And the answer is yes. So I can't sit here and say I have issues with the plan or the proposed plan. And that's it.
Diane?
My only comments are I really like the zigzag way of doing it. If the ledge is going to get in the way in the west part, then we'll have to find a better way. My only other comment is what Mike Casserly had brought up before about putting a guarantee in. And that's everything. Thank you.
Lenny? Did we lose Lenny? Lenny, you
No.
seem to be muted.
I'm
good.
here. I'm hitting buttons on my screen here. I mean, I understand the owner's concern, and this is not strong arm tactics. I think we're just looking for something that looks a little bit better on Cottage Street. That's all. I think just a little bit of effort, and I think we can come to a good agreement for the city. That's all. Thanks.
Jeff?
I thought we discussed the landscape plan at the last meeting we had with Greg. I don't know, we approved the plan, and a lot of the stuff on the plan wasn't done to the way the plan is laid out. So I don't know what his problem is. We're not trying to be hard on him, but, we approved the plan and he didn't, you know, go with it. But, if he's got ledge there, there's gonna be a problem with planting stuff. I don't think he really answered Beth's questions about some of the sizes. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
Completely understand the reasoning for changing around the ledges. You're not going to be able to get anything to grow or last there. So I would have no problem with the proposed planting schedule.
I guess that leaves me, yes. So I understand changes come up in projects all the time. It's just how we handle them when they come up. I would also agree with Diane. I really like the zigzag patterns because it does a lot better job in the screening aspect. One thing that I kind of saw lacking based on the original plan as opposed to this proposed plan is not as many trees. I would have preferred to see more trees to have the variations in height to provide better screening. I guess those are my main comments. And then I would also comment regarding the performance guarantee to Mike's earlier point that I think that would be wise to put that in place. I don't know what that amount would be, Mike. I would certainly look to you to help provide some guidance around that.
Sure.
I guess that is all my comments.
I would look to the species that are listed here and the number of them, and then also talk with the applicant and just make sure that the plan and this match. I think it does, but I would just ask them and see if anything needs to be added or changed, and then make sure I have the right process in sending this number in. And if you want to give me, if somebody wanted to give me the jurisdiction and just establish the final number, that would be fine. I see that the applicant would, just give me a simple answer there, and would be. I think he'd be willing, since he proposed this. I would think he'd be willing to give this to the city to hold until the plans are established. I just want to check the final number with him before I would put this in. Right now, it says $16,500, and that could very well be the current number. I just wanted to verify that.
Okay. Would that be something you can confirm, Greg, or is that something you want to come back with? Are you there, Greg?
I don't know if Greg has audio right now. I don't see the audio component next to his name on the participants window. I'm not sure if his call dropped.
So I guess if it's okay, Madam Chair, I'd like to point out that the amount of the performance guarantee cannot be established until the planting plan is established. And I didn't hear clarity. I didn't hear a clear consensus from the board on this. I do think I would suggest that you need to break this apart a little bit. I don't think anybody is saying that the trees at the top of the slope should be installed where they found ledge. I think the issue is really the plantings along the frontage. It sounded to me like Jace was okay with the alternative plantings along the frontage. Tom sounded like he was okay with it. Jennifer and Diane, and Lenny, I think. Lenny was a little less specific than Diane and Jennifer were in terms of talking about the zigzag pattern. So I'm not sure how you want to proceed with this, Madam Chair. I think, you know, it would be important to provide good clarity to the board, to the applicant, so that he doesn't spin his wheels, if you will, that he knows what the board is looking for and he can try to respond to it.
Yeah, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a comment, and please, any of the board members, speak up. I don't think any of us are saying we don't agree with the proposed plan. I think we're all conceptually, at a bare minimum, with what's laid out here, we're okay. But I think there's a few of us who perhaps would like to see a little bit more or in different patterns. Is that a correct summarization, or is there something, am I way off base here?
Madam Chairman.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I agree with your statement.
Okay. I think Tom, was it Tom who had a comment, or no, it was Lenny who also had a comment about the landscaping pattern. Is there any more comment or thoughts that you have around that, Lenny, to help clarify?
Yeah,
I
I think the zigzag pattern that you're talking about is okay, and just try to enhance the front of the property a little bit more. That's all.
Okay, so would you describe that as like additional? You would like to see additional plantings of some type?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair comment. Yeah, some additional plantings. I'm not really into horticulture, I guess, but I guess, yeah, maybe some additional plantings. I'm not sure what those would look like. Maybe a little more screening, I think that Beth was referring to, on the front of the property would be good.
Okay. So it sounds like you and I are pretty well on the same page. Like, I would like to see a few more plantings in there to help provide some screening. Diane, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think everybody else would be okay with the current proposed landscape plan and I think they would still be, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you would all still be okay if he did what he's proposing and then a little bit more. Like, that would be positive, correct?
Correct. I agree.
Okay. Do other board members also agree? I guess I would summarize it like that, Beth. I think we're all okay with what he's proposing, but it would be nice to see a little bit more, some additional plantings that provide some more varied height for screening purposes. And preferably in a zigzag pattern. Yes?
Excuse me.
Question, Madam Chair?
Jace Clark, yeah, raise your hand.
Go ahead, Jace, yeah.
I just don't like the idea of leaving it as, you know, what's proposed and a little more, because by just leaving it at and a little more, that doesn't give him any more idea on what he needs to do.
Right, but I think what we're saying, that little bit more shouldn't provide some additional screening coverage for the front.
Maybe I can help. It looks to me like there are at least there's three issues to talk about. 2 areas, and then one is an issue. So if I'm looking at the planting plan, you can see, let's go to the upper left-hand side, and you can see that there's, the three large circles. I'm sorry, I can't read them. I think they may be river birches. And then you've got a space, and then you've got that planting bed that I think is largely a perennial bed around the sign. The space in between, if you look closer to where the building is, you've got basically two trees there, and I think they're pines. And so there is a gap right there where I think that some additional zigzag there could close that gap. The second area I would say is go to the very bottom of the plan, and you've got the planting, the gardens that they proposed, and this additional sort of cluster of shrubs on the upper part of that building. And then you've got it's hard to see this, but I think there's like 5 trees that are in a single line that go about 2/3 of the way down the building. And I think that's another place where there's a gap where you could put some additional trees in there to kind of reconstruct that zigzag pattern. The other one that I was mentioned, so those are the 2 pieces of geography. The other issues are whether you want to anchor those, the edges of that driveway. And the way that was done on the approved plan was by having 1 or 2 or 3 trees, and then some shrubs, basically anchoring those. There's going to be, with the cutting back of that driveway, there is going to be the opportunity to put something in there. I'm not saying that they won't have to dig some stuff out. And those are where the 2 honeycomb patterns show up. I have no idea what they are. I don't know if they're a landscape element like rocks, or if there's some sort of drainage structure there. It's just not clear to me what's going on, and I think it's a different symbol than what we're seeing along the bottom of the plan, where you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those areas. But I think it's a different symbol, and I'm sorry, I can't read the plan as clearly on the screen as I'd like. Actually, hold on, I might be able to make it a full screen again, and then I'll have to get out of it. Enter full screen. Yeah. I don't know, maybe that is the same symbol. In which case, my guess is that what we're seeing in the upper part is a drainage structure of some sort, but the symbols should be defined in some way on the plan. But anyway, that's my suggestion, is that you've got 2 specific areas where they could add some zigzagging in that would provide that filtering and some variation in height. And then I think the other issue is, do you want to try to anchor the edges of the driveway? Right now they're proposing Garden A and Garden B, as opposed to what had been on the approved plan, which included some trees.
And Beth?
Does that help at all?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
The honeycombed area there, that's riprap according to the previous plans.
It's riprap, okay.
Yep.
I think you articulated that very well, Beth. I where those gaps are, that's exactly where I would like to see some additional screening. I don't know. I know, Jace, you had some thoughts. What do I guess I guess the question to the board is, do you agree with what Beth just said, talking about those gap areas and including some additional? I guess from my personal opinion, I'm less concerned with the driveway anchoring. Yeah, it would be nice. It would look beautiful. But I guess I would prefer to see more screening in those areas of gaps if I had to choose anchoring the driveway or screening. I don't know if there are other opinions.
I think
yes.
Diane has a hand raised.
Go ahead, Diane.
Madam Chair, I agree with Beth. With adding the extra in the front with the trees to provide the screening. I believe the applicant has the opportunity here to make a nice presentation with the anchoring in the areas of the driveway. I would hope that he would go forward with that. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I make a quick comment? I don't mean to overdo it. Well, just that I always try to remind folks about snow storage in a tough winter when they move plants over near a driveway like that. I just want to ask you to remember that.
Good point. Thank you. Okay, I don't know if I feel like we're any. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Who was that?
That was Beth. I was going to say, just in response to that, there's a lot of daylilies in those garden beds, and I can tell you from experience, I've got daylilies in my esplanades, and they get buried in the winter with the snow from the street, and they come back very nicely every year. So I think, at least in terms of the daylilies, they're going to be pretty tolerant. It may be appropriate, again, to ask their consultant to indicate whether they've got concerns about salt tolerance with some of those other shrubs, but I think in general they're probably reasonable there, but it's worth asking.
Madam Chair, may I?
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the proposed planning schedules, or Beth's correct with the daylilies. I had the same problem, but I also have problems. The azaleas are very hardy. Boxwoods come up. The hydrangeas, mine get buried with the snow, and they still bloom the next year. I understand Mike Casserly's concerns, but with what they're proposing, these, in my opinion, are pretty hardy, and they'll come back every year.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
I think so. Yeah. Are we,
So
do you feel like we're any closer on that one?
I didn't get a clear, I got what I got from the people who spoke, and we did not hear from Tom and Jack and who else was it? And Jace about feeding back about the two gap areas, but I did not get the sense. So I got the sense from the three of you that spoke that filling those two gaps you're in support of. I did not hear strong support for replacing those garden beds anchoring the driveway. That in general, people I think were okay with that. I guess I would suggest that if anybody disagrees with that, they should speak up so that we can move on to the next topic.
Yeah. I'm not hearing anything.
Okay.
So let's move on.
So the last category were a series of miscellaneous issues, difficulty reading note 1 on the approved plan. The font does not appear to be supported by the city software, so I think that may be what the problem is with that. Whoops, hold on just a second, I just lost my screen. We talked about the issue about the impervious cover information. The changes in the revision blocks are pretty generic. That's a perennial problem for staff, that we'd like to see greater specificity. The consultants give us feedback that their software program doesn't allow them to be real specific, and there's not enough space. Whether you want to make an issue out of any of these things, I think you provided pretty clear direction about the impervious cover. The other two issues, if you want to make an issue out of them, you can. If not, that's fine. And I think Greg may have left us because he's not got any audio connection anymore at all.
Greg, if you are still here, you are able to use the chat function if there's something you'd like to say and you're not able to enable audio.
Okay. Jennifer, do you want to go around on this or just move on to the next topic?
Let's move to the next topic, please.
Okay. So the recommendation was to provide some clear direction, and I think for the most part that you've done that. And then my suggestion was that you develop a date or identify a specific date by which you're expecting the applicant to provide revised plans and documents. And then once those documents and plans are provided, we'll schedule the review for the next meeting after we've given staff, at least a week to take a look at them and to respond.
Okay, should we ask the board for thoughts on timing?
Either that or somebody could make a motion, one or the other.
I'll make a motion that we give the applicant 3 weeks.
I'll second it.
Okay, why don't we take a roll call vote then?
Okay, so Jace?
Yep.
Diane?
Yes.
Lenny?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Madam Chair, may I make one comment?
Quickly, please.
Is all this going in writing or is this virtual?
I'll prepare.
I'll
I'll prepare something in writing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All righty. Are you ready to move to the next item?
Yes. The next item on our agenda, correct?
Correct.
I have too many papers on my desk. I'm trying to find the agenda. I know that it is Pepin, but I'm trying to, hold on, sorry, read the funnel number. Okay, so old business file 03-19-R, Pepin and Sons, care of Matthew Pepin. So, Beth, I don't know if you want to introduce us to this item before we have the applicant speak here briefly.
So this is a continuation of a conversation that's been going on for some time. There have been 5 separate memos that have been prepared on this. The planning board did receive the site plan review committee's recommendations at the last meeting and began its discussion on a topic by topic basis. Based upon the discussion that the board had and requests for some information and some comments that the applicant made in the course of the review, the recommendations were modified and there is additional information to be presented. I think that rather going any further in terms of an update, I'd like to step back and I lost my entire screen now. I'd like to step back and just let the applicant have their say and then move into the topic by topic discussion. I will remind you that at the last meeting, the applicant was muted on the second, third, and fourth item and raised that point at the end of the meeting, and the chair said that she was going to revisit those issues this evening. So I just wanted to point that out to you. At this point, I'll just stop and turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I just want to reiterate the process. Matt, I know you provided a full presentation to us last time. I don't know if there's a brief intro that you'd like to provide to the board today, but we'll go through topic by topic. We'll have Beth introduce it and then give you a couple minutes to make a brief statement as part of that topic area and those updates. So with that, Matt, if you would please start off, state your name and address for the record, and if there's any update that you'd like to give us before we hop into the topic areas.
Yes, can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Matthew Pepin, and I reside at 97 Brush Road, Acton, Maine at this current time. I do want to clarify something quickly. It was said in the memo that I read recently that I would be given 20 minutes of time to speak. I just want to make sure that that is the case as I prepared statements for that allotted time slot.
Well, this was a continuation from the last meeting where you did make your full 20-minute presentation. Would it be better that it sounds like you have something prepared? Would that work better for you rather than speaking briefly to each topic area as we step through?
Yes, I would really like to be given the chance to speak. Probably won't last 20 minutes, but I think it did say in the memo that I would be given the opportunity to speak for 20 minutes, so I would like to do that.
Okay, please, why don't you go ahead then?
And I'm here to talk to you today about our gravel pit approval. So I'd like to start off by thanking you as members of the board for all the work that you do. Job's certainly not easy. And you made an astounding effort helping us so far and working hard to get to the bottom of the facts. I'd like to thank you for that. I'd like to begin by talking a little bit quickly about the history of the project. This is our seventh year that we've been out there. We've been trying to make it through this approval process for about the last year and a half to 2 years. It's been a very complicated process. It's been difficult. We've spent probably between $75,000 to $100,000 so far just on this renewal, which is what this really is, where we are renewing our application that we had already got approved through a previous planning board 7 years ago. So we've really spent a lot of an unprecedented amount of time working on it. And part of, kind of talking about it is that we're kind of, right now I can see that we're dealing with a lot of problems that we had during the original approval. Problems that we already addressed during that original approval have come back up throughout this process, which has really slowed things down. We've had to go back and forth with Mike about the Great Works stream. We already had submitted a letter from an engineer during the first approval. A special engineer submitted a stamped letter that said the stream would not rise a significant amount. And despite that, we're kind of rebattling those issues again, and we have come to a resolution on that. We are now again dealing with reclamation, and just trying to emphasize the point that 7 years ago, when we came up with a reclamation plan for the site, it was approved by the board. It's what we've done on site since that time. We've had a great relationship with the landowner out there, Mr. Fall, and the other landowners, Mr. DeLuca. As far as reclamation goes on site, we've done it to their liking. As I mentioned in the last meeting, Mr. Fall is somebody who plans on he's a farmer, and he plans on haying the fields after we're done with this location. We've worked with him exclusively to provide the type of grass and the type of surface that he wants to see on the lower levels of the pit. We've also worked with him to plant a significant amount of trees on all the slopes in the pit. And talking about reclamation quickly, it's kind of surprising to us that the planning director had put out a new memo from the town of Scarborough about reclamation procedures over in that town. Surprising to us because here we are a year and a half into the process, and we are now, seems like, revisiting this from scratch. Again, the plan that we have for reclamation was established 7 years ago. It was approved by the planning board with consensus from the landowners. We've had no complaints from the landowners regarding that reclamation plan. And we don't really see a need to overcomplicate this issue of reclamation, especially so late in the process. I know you guys are probably getting a little tired of us coming up here because it has been a long process, but I really want to emphasize that part of the problem is that it's been very difficult to work with the planning department on a number of issues regarding this process. And I understand, where Greg Patterson, who just spoke, where he was kind of coming from with some of his frustrations, because we've also dealt with those frustrations as well. And being in the construction industry, we talk to all the people in this town who are contractors and business owners on a regular basis. And there's a lot of frustration with the way that some of these things are handled. I've got a few quick examples for you of some of the things that we've had to deal with that seem kind of over the top and outlandish. One issue was groundwater mounding. We had to deal with about 3 or 4 months of confusion related to this term. We had the water district superintendent kind of acknowledge that he did not think that this was an issue that was going on out there, but the planning director was still saying that she thought it was an issue. I had to consult with 3 or 4 engineers to find out what this problem was, and it turns out that it wasn't really related to groundwater at all. It was something that occurred with a different field of engineering, surface water engineering. So that was kind of about something that we had to fight back and forth on. I don't want to say fight. It wasn't a fight, but we had to go back and forth on it for 3 or 4 months, understanding what this term meant. And we finally agreed that this was not something that was happening at the gravel pit. And likewise, we were told that we needed to do an investigation on the effects to the wetlands on site. And there was some back and forth on that because it's not technically our job to do like a wetland study to assess the environmental impact that a gravel pit will have on a wetland. The DEP is out there every single day, and they assess that we have to be a certain distance away from wetlands. They say there are certain rules for when you're operating around wetlands. So it's just kind of an example of where it wasn't our job to spend a lot of money, more money than we've already spent, on trying to put together a full-blown investigation on how we would affect the wetlands. And the same thing kind of is related with this issue with the over-excavation of the embankment. We kind of keep going back to this, but at this point in time, we have both the DEP and we have Dave Parent on our side saying that, this is not a problem. Dave Parent said it's not an issue for the groundwater to be doing this. Again, we're not in the 2,500 day zone. We're not allowed to import any materials onto the site. So the confusing part for us here again is that, we have the DEP on our side, we have Dave Parent on our side, but we have other members from the planning department saying that they don't think this is a good idea. And we would love to be able to look to respond to that, but we really don't have any facts that were put together at any point in time on facts about why this is a problem or why this could be a problem. We haven't seen any studies related to why this could be a problem. We would love to be able to respond to this more thoroughly, but we don't truly understand what the issue is or could be. And again, we have a DEP, we have Dave Parent saying that, this is not an issue. And one of the reasons why it's important for us to talk about is that when we originally got this gravel pit approved, we were approved to be able to take the material in those slopes. And to not be able to do that moving forward means that we're going to lose a significant amount of material out there. And it's a real bummer because we invested a lot of time and money originally to get this gravel pit going and up and running. And to have things change like this on us, 5-7 years later, it's confusing, and from a business standpoint, it's not very friendly. Again, we've been approved originally to do this practice. We've got the DEP, we've got Dave Parent on our side. We need more clarification on what the problem is so that we have a chance to respond to it adequately. So I'm going to move on. That was kind of a basic background of kind of some of the frustration that we've had to deal with, in the last 2 years. I do want to talk about the topics because I know that those are kind of the important things that we need to get to. I'm going to start off by talking about open acreage. So open acreage, I do see that Beth has revised her recommendation for this, and I want to thank her for that. It seems like members of the board and members of the town are realizing that we have grown in some ways. We're manufacturing different products on site at this time, so we need more space for those products. As we discussed at the last meeting, the DEP does not recognize these stockpiles and roadways as open gravel pit area. The town of Sanford does. So currently, again, we have 4.5 acres of stockpiles out there. I saw that Beth had recommended in her updated recommendation that perhaps the board would consider giving us a 25% increase on top of the 15 acres that we have, and that increase would just be for stockpiles. We really appreciate that recommendation. That's moving us in the right direction, and we would be happy with that. It would help us substantially. The big thing is that giving us this extra amount of acreage to stockpile our material on site is going to let us get off the site quicker. We're going to be able to sell the material on site a lot quicker. If we don't have the room to stockpile different products that we'd like to sell, it's foreseeable that it could end up making us stay out there for another 3 to 5 to 6 years, because we just can't store what we need to make. So we're really hoping that the board will continue to have this discussion with us and talk to us about this. If we were granted the additional 25% increase, we would have a total allowable open acreage of 18.7 acres. We have 15 now, so that's a 3.7 acre increase. Again, we could clearly specify that increase would be for the use of stockpiles. And that, if that happened, that would leave us in a situation where we had 1 acre of land at this time that we needed to reclaim for the town to get back into compliance. We think that we'll probably need 6 months is a pretty tough time frame to reclaim when you're looking for a 90% vegetative standard, because you really need to have some thick grass growth going to get that standard. We think that we should be given about 1 year to get that 1 acre reclaimed and taken care of for the town. That would give us an adequate amount of time to get that growth going. And of course, we're not going to be able to expand anymore in the pit without reclaiming. So we can't open up any new areas without closing areas first. And we fully accept that and understand that. But we're really hoping that the town can work with us, and we want to thank Beth for her recommendation. It was very helpful. I'd like to go on to talk quickly about the inspection schedule that's been proposed. When I read through what the inspection is going to include, I see 8 different items that are included in the inspection. We've got reclaimed contours, depth of excavation, amount of open area, construction of specified berms, elevations, slopes, reclamation/revegetation, and the 8th one says, among other provisions of the new permit, which is a very vague. So the framework so far for what this inspection schedule will include, it's basically an inspection of the entire operation, everything that's going on in the operation. And to me, that seems a little bit kind of wild and crazy, because we really have 3 problems out there that we've acknowledged that we need to keep an eye on in the future. And those problems are the amount of open acreage, the height above the groundwater table, and the limits of operation as far as where we're digging. So those are the 3 big problems that we had out here. And we think that it would be fair, if we're going to do inspections, to look at those 3 problems, to prevent those 3 problems from happening again. Because with the way that the framework of this is set up right now, we've got an engineer could come in, and I did see Mike Casterly's estimates. Mike identifies that it would cost about $500 to $600 per visit from an engineer. But he does cite after that if surveying is required, that cost is not included. So the problem is that an engineer can come in and he can look around but he can't visually see whether we're at the right heights or whether we're at the right acreage without the use of a surveyor. Really, a surveyor is what you need to check these three things: to check the open area, to check the limits of operation, and to check the depth above groundwater levels. You don't need an engineer for that. You need a surveyor. And we've proposed using Steve Horn, who's a local surveyor. He knows the pit in and out. He did the original survey for us. We propose having him come in 2-3 times a year to do an inspection and writing a report to the town about those three issues. This would be a reasonable cost. It would protect the town from these three problems. And, you know, one of the larger issues with having a civil engineer come in is that the way that this plan is written is that if there's one violation will trip us back to 6 inspections per year. So 6 inspections per year is a lot of our company time. It's a lot of our company money. And if a typical civil engineer comes in, he might see a problem with the berms. He might see some small problems. Everything's not perfect all the time. So if he even sees a slight issue, then it would trip us back into 6 inspections per year, and we would be doing that for 3 years until we came back to the board. And that is a lot of company resource and time and a lot of money. And so our proposal is to limit these inspections to the problems that we've had on site, to use a surveyor to identify whether those problems are happening or not, and to make this a more reasonable inspection schedule and process that's more fair to us based on the actual infractions we had. We don't want to overcomplicate a gravel pit. It is a gravel pit. At the end of the day, it's a fairly simple operation. Your slopes have to be right. Your grass has to be growing. I don't want to oversimplify it, but my point is that I don't want to have to come back to the board, and I don't think you want me to come back in another, month or 2 months, because this process has gotten so confusing and overwhelming that it's just not working for anybody. So I really hope we can get some resolution on what a fair inspection schedule would look like. I really want to remind members of the board that this is a very tough time for everybody economically. Our business is certainly struggling. A lot of businesses are struggling. We're doing our best to keep our heads above the water, but it's not the time right now to put on extra financial burden onto businesses when it's not needed. And we need to be fair about those costs. We need to be fair about that. So I want to go on and talk quickly about 3 topics that I had seen that we need to discuss. One is this 200-foot limitation on the amount of material removed. That is an old kind of limitation. We need that to be changed so that we can actually process for more than 200-foot section of embankment. That allows us to make the products that we need to make. That's something that we need the board's help with. Our company needs help with. There was some talk about the outcome for future penalties in Beth's transcript. I think it's fair to say that we should have to experience the same penalties that all other gravel pits in town have to experience if they have a problem. We want the rules to apply to us just like they apply to everyone else. And then there was also some talk we had at the last meeting about the setting the new reclamation contour 6 feet above the current gravel pit. And I just needed to spend a little bit of time with the board tonight to clarify something about that the 6 feet regulation as far as the new reclamation contours go is great. Where we're going to be developing new pits in the future, we are all for 6 feet. That's an extra 1 foot above the DEP and the town requirement. The problem is that in areas where we have already developed in the gravel pit, obtaining a 6 foot buffer from the groundwater table will be next to impossible. And it's not impossible, but the reason is that we've already developed those areas to a certain height, and we would have to go back and add a foot of gravel across the entire area that we've already developed, and across also areas where we've reclaimed. So we need to clarify that in the future, reclamation should be at 5 feet where we have already developed, which is the DEP standard. The DEP actually says that you only need 2 or 3 feet of substrate surface to effectively filter the water. 5 feet is actually an extra amount that they put on as a safety precaution. 5 feet where we've already developed and where we currently have open is a reasonable expectation, where we wouldn't have to go back and do a tremendous amount of work to change the entire grade on the gravel pit that we've already developed. But in areas where we plan on going in the future, we certainly agree that as an extra protection, we should stay with 6 feet. So quickly to go back, it's been tough. This application has been really tough on us. We've struggled. It's been a year and a half. We've invested a lot of time and energy into this, and this is a renewal. We went through this process once. We proved a lot of these things once already, and we find ourselves doing it all again. And me and my brothers, we're the 4th generation. We've got some important decisions to really make in the next 5 years about if we want to continue to grow in the city. And we know has nothing to do with the planning board whatsoever. It doesn't have anything to do with the planning board, but it's working with the planning department and with the city engineers and some of these people. Sometimes it's very frustrating and difficult, and it's hard on businesses. And we are hearing that from a lot of businesses. It's not just us. And we've got decisions about whether we want to put a new manufacturing facility in this town for our precast concrete. We'd like to probably employ another 10 to 15 employees in that shop, and it just seems like it's so hard to deal with some of these things that we're wondering whether it's really worth it or not, whether it's really worth trying to continue to invest in this community. And we work with other towns because we have gravel pits in other towns, and we've never seen this kind of infusion, and we've never seen these kind of things go back and forth where we just assume that something might be a problem, and we don't really give you any facts, but you have to prove us otherwise. And it's been a frustrating process for us. We want to work with the board to make it right. We've wanted to fix the problems that we had on site for the last year and a half now, and we're trying to get there. We really are. And I know you guys are getting probably sick of seeing me up here, but I'm telling you that there's things that are going on that are making this difficult. And it's not easy for us dealing with some of these things, but we're doing our best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. With that, why don't we jump into our topic areas? I know we're not going to have a lot of time to deliberate tonight, so I'm just kind of setting that expectation with folks now. This is likely going to have to carry forward again. So Beth, do you want to take us through the topic areas, please?
Sure. So the first topic area is the non-compliance with the 2013 site plan and the current conditions and the recommended inspection schedule. I provided in your packet the cost estimate that Mike put together back in January. In addition, he did go out to third-party inspectors, and in general, the information Mike had presented back in January, I think, said between $500 and $600, and I rounded that up to about 8 in my head as I was going through this process. The third-party inspectors, except for one of them, are generally coming in pretty much in that price range. This was based upon using the DEP inspection report that was provided for pits in 2 other communities, one in Standish and one in Scarborough. As you can see in looking through those, it does assume that the inspector is going to basically walk through the site, classify whether he doesn't see any outstanding violations, some minor violations, or some serious issues. I would assume it would be the serious issues that might prompt the need to go back in and do more detailed inspections, potentially some surveying at that point. But it was never the intent that there would be a survey element as part of this on a regular basis. Let's see. I did come back and say that, the applicant did point out that there's likely 4 to 5 months a year when the ground is going to be covered with snow. I may have misinterpreted that to mean that they would not be operating during that time, rather than it would be difficult to do the inspections during that time. But certainly, if it were only a 7 to 8 months out of the year schedule, then I think the way that you get around the issue of an inspection every 2 months, and some of those months being useless, potentially 2 of those, that the applicant could notify code enforcement when they're starting operations and terminating operations, and the inspection schedule can be set up based upon when the operating month would be. You did express concern about, well, here we are, already 2 years into the process. Where do we start? And so I did propose a modification of the schedule. So essentially, what I proposed is year 1 would be year 3, year 2 would be year 4. Year 4 would be year 2, and year 5 would be year 3. Let's see, and the comment about specifying an outcome for future violations, the applicant had proposed that it simply be put in the hands of code enforcement. You know that the zoning ordinance requires him to issue a stop work order until all violations are remediated. Obviously, that has not happened in this particular case. So rather than sort of just throwing it to Jamie, my recommendation is that you specify what your expectations are going to be if there are violations. So that's pretty much it. At the last meeting, that's what you had asked for, was that additional information about the cost. In general, that outlier in cost that was particularly high, we would go through a bidding process to establish who the inspector should be. Likely that person would be dropped out of the competition because they're completely out of scale with the other proposals or the other cost estimates that were provided. The other expectation is that if you've got the same inspector, and again, I think it is really important that this is an independent third-party inspector that does not have an affiliation with the applicant, but is actually reporting to the city on behalf of the city. That person initially and I've discussed this with Mike as well, that the initial inspections might cost more than the subsequent inspections because the inspector will be familiar with the site and the operations and be able to remember what has occurred when he did the inspection previously. That's pretty much what I have to say on this. It is an issue. It'd be good to get some resolution on one way or the other so the applicant knows what's going to happen. That's what I pretty much had to do for an introduction.
Thank you, Beth. Matt, do you have any additional brief comments before the board deliberates?
Yeah, just, I tend to disagree that a civil engineer needs to be involved. I think that a surveyor would be able to adequately look at the 3 issues that we've had out there and even would be able to do that more thoroughly than a civil engineer would be able to do. A civil engineer, like I said, he can't tell anything by eye out there, by just looking around. The town is better off having a surveyor. And I agree that maybe we don't have to use the person that I've specified, but I think very strongly that the town and the applicant need to agree upon who the civil engineer or who the surveyor will be. It shouldn't be a decision made by either party, perhaps, because there are certain engineering firms that are familiar with gravel pits. They understand these operations. Those are the type of engineers that you need to have on site because they know what to look for. They know what's important. And if you have the wrong engineer on site, it can be a massive headache and can be a big problem for us and for the town because you don't have the right person representing you. So if the board is inclined to say that a third-party inspector should be hired, I think that we should have the right to have a say on who that inspector is. And I would preferably say that that inspector is somebody who works for an engineering firm that is involved with the Maine Aggregate Society here in Maine, so that they understand gravel pits and the nature of these operations closely.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Beth, why don't we open it up to the board for discussion?
Okay, Jace?
Yeah, the only thing I had to comment on was with the inspection schedule, seeing that it's not the industry, it's not in operation for the whole year. Should those be scaled back? That's it.
Diane?
I don't have any problem with the recommended inspection schedule that was discussed. I look at what Matt is saying, but I also think that, you know, in different aspects of the city, the RFPs that go out, I think are fair, and I think it should be done that way with a third party, with the RFP, if that's how it's supposed to be done. That's it.
Lenny?
Hi, yes. I was hoping to hear some more tonight in the way of solutions. I'm not hearing any solutions. I'm a little concerned. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Jack?
Yeah, I guess I agree with Diane on the RFPs. They could be written pretty stringently so we get who we want and make Pepin happy too.
Anything else?
Nope, overall.
Tom?
Yeah, so I would be the number of inspections may be a little bit heavy because of the fact that we live in New England, and even if they are operating in the wintertime, may not be operating at the same capacity it would be in the summertime. Also, echo the idea of the RFP being very clear, very clearly written, that the statement of work defines what it is we're looking for, to make sure that we are getting, one, an adequate estimate, and also somebody who is qualified to do this type of assessment. But at the end of the day, their license or their stamp is really in the lurch if we do go the engineer route. That's all I have.
Okay. Jennifer?
So I agree with a lot of what was said. I agree with the revised recommendation to a certain point. I think it was Jack, you just mentioned that you felt the inspection schedule might be a little heavy. I think that was Jack anyway. I'm sort of leaning in that direction as well. You know, I think having the inspections during the months of operation, you know, I don't know what the right amount of time would be. You know, maybe it's 3 months, you know, every quarter. I also agree with the RFP process. I think that is definitely important. And there was another point, and I totally lost my train of thought on that one. Future violations. So having the code enforcement enforcement issue a stop work order until all violations are remediated. I think depending on the severity of what that violation is, and I think if there is a stop work order for whatever reason, I think that would be a good point for the applicant to come back before the board regarding what those violations are.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Lenny has a hand raised. Do you have something to say?
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say I think orderly inspections are fair.
Okay. Thank you. I'm trying to think if there was any other open questions that I didn't touch on in my comment, Beth. I think I covered
it. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to bring this to closure, the way we had been working on it at the last meeting, there should be a motion now and then a vote.
Is there a motion? Like perhaps we're not ready for a motion.
So more discussion then, I think.
It sounds like it, and I lost my place in the document where we were.
Page 3.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So where are we stuck, guys? Are we stuck on the frequency of inspections? Is that what we need? Where we need to dig in, or where do we need to dig in? Where are we misaligned?
It sounded like the frequency was let me see if I can help you through this. It sounded like there was not opposition with going with a third-party inspector. There was a fair amount of focus that the RFP had to be clear about what was expected, and that the individual selected would be qualified. Maybe if we could just get, if anybody disagrees with that, then we can set that issue aside and go on to the next one where I think you've got agreement. Okay. I didn't hear anything, so I'm going to assume that you're in agreement with that. The next piece, I think, actually had to do with the schedule itself. If you go to, let's see if is there agreement that there should be sort of a decrease in the number, sort of a progressive decrease in the number of inspections per year when there are no violations. If there's anybody who disagrees with that, then speak up. And then we'll eventually get to the numbers. Okay. So the proposal started at every 2 months of operation, which made it clear that we're talking about months of operation, then declining to every 3 months, and then declining to every 6 months. There was, Jennifer is the only one who put out an alternative there, suggesting maybe starting with either every 3 months or every 4 months, and then going down from there.
I think Diane also agreed with the every 3 months as well.
I do.
All right. So if you started with every 3 months in the first year, what would you go down to for year 2? Would it be every 4 months or every 5 months? Pick a number, guys.
6.
Or less. So you go,
let's go 3 to 6
months in year 1, then you go every 6 months in year 2, and then what would you do in year 3?
Why don't you just get rid of year 1, and then we just leave it with year 1, 2, and 3? Meaning, you know what I'm saying? Just shift everything.
Well, there no longer is a year 1 or 2. It starts at year 3. So are you suggesting getting rid of year 3 and just going to year 4 and 5?
Huh?
We only have 3 years in this permit left. Okay? So that's why in this memo, the last memo, it said years 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5. In this memo, it says years 3, 4, and 5, because we're starting at year 3. So if we follow up with your proposal, are you suggesting we drop year 3 and simply start, not the years, but what is being proposed in year 4 would become what you're proposing in year 3? So in other words, in year 3, this first year that he would actually be acting on this permit, there would be inspections every 3 months. Then the following year, if there's no violations, it would be every 6 months. And then the following year, I'm assuming you'd go down to every month. Every just one a year. Is that what you're saying?
I'm fine
Yeah,
with
3,
that.
6, 12.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, this is Jack. I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right. So unless I hear objection to that, that's the next piece. And then I think the last piece is associated with consequences if there are violations. And what I thought I heard Jennifer saying is that depending upon the severity of the violation, presumably if they're minor violations readily fixed, that they would simply be brought to their attention, they would do it. But if they're more severe violations on the order of the top 3 violations that we've been talking about on this project, then there would be a stop work order put in place until the applicant remediated those violations.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with what Beth is saying, but I want it very clear in writing what our definitions are for the severe violations, because I don't want to back and forth after the fact if the stop order goes into effect, if there is a severe violation.
I agree with you, Diane. Yeah, we'll have to clearly define what that means.
So this is Tom. I have one other comment, not counter, but on the other side of that. If a violation is deemed not to be severe and can be adequately or very quickly fixed, will it count towards the inspection violation prohibition?
Again, we'd have to define what minor violations.
Yeah, assuming we defined what a minor versus a severe or minor versus a major is, would a minor that can be corrected, or whatever that definition is, go against them with regards to inspections?
I guess for me, I
just
would
something to think about.
Yeah, and it's a great point you bring up, Tom. For myself, I would lean in the direction of no, it wouldn't count because they're not getting a stop work order, and it's not, you know what I mean? Like if there was a stop work order, then I think that should be counted, and the following year there wouldn't be a reduction in inspections. It would have to continue at that same frequency for another year. But if it's just something minor that could be fixed, like, I don't know, whatever that amount of time is, then, let them keep going.
Okay, I agree with that.
Okay. What about others?
I agree.
So it sounds to me like you've got the basis of a motion.
Yes, we do.
Do you want me to try to summarize it?
Will you please, Beth? That would be really helpful.
Okay. A third-party inspector hired by the city based upon a clear RFP regarding the inspection as well as the qualifications, that the inspection schedule would be starting with year 3 every 3 months, and then if no serious violations, which we're going to define, then it would revert in year 4 to every 6 months. If no serious violations in year 5, then it has once a year. We would between now and the next meeting, work on defining what a severe violation is that would result in a stop work order. If the violations were not severe and are quickly fixed, and again, that would all be part of this definition we're going to need to come up with, it would not affect the violation schedule. However, if it was severe, it would count.
I will
And
second
make a motion
that
to
motion.
it.
That was Jack.
Oh, sorry.
And Jennifer, were you the second?
Yes.
Oh, well,
Okay.
Diane.
Diane. Okay. So, any more discussion before we do a roll call? Okay. Jace,
Yep.
Diane,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Okay. Madam Chair, it's 4 minutes before 9. Do you want to go on to the next topic, or do you want to table this and begin the discussion at that issue?
I think we're
the
going to
next
need
meeting.
to I think we're going to need to table for the next meeting, since there is only a few minutes left. We won't get to any resolution between now and then.
Okay. Is there a motion to table then?
I'll make a motion to table, Diane.
Second.
And who was the second? I'm sorry, Tom?
Yes.
All in favor? Actually, I got to go through the roll call. Sorry. Jace?
Yep.
Diane?
Yes.
Lenny?
Yes.
Yes.
Jack? Tom?
Yes.
And Jennifer?
Yes.
All righty. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so item is tabled to our next meeting then. Let me find where I stuck my agenda. I keep losing it. I think Beth, is there anything in the planning director's report that you'd like to share?
Trying to decide, I think not. Why don't we just hold off to the next meeting?
Okay. Anything for communications? Anything any of the board members would like to share for communications?
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, if I may.
Okay. Diane, why don't you go start, and then I think, was that Tom?
It was Jace.
Okay. Just a sec, Jace.
Yep.
Go ahead, Diane.
It's just something I thought about. I don't know. I want to throw it at the board. Also, with the new assistant planner, working virtually is okay, and that's great. Somehow I'd like to see who I'm talking to sometimes. Would it be okay if I recommended that the board somehow share their photo with Molly, and Molly can share her photo with them via email? It just gives more. I'd like to see who the new member or who the new assistant planner is, and I'll just leave it at that. If anyone would like to do that.
Is there anybody who's opposed to that idea? What about this, Diane? What if you start an email chain with all the board members and Beth and Molly and whomever else, and we can perhaps start a chain, so to speak, email chain with that.
That'd be fine. I'd like to hear what Molly. I'd like to hear what Molly thinks.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it would be really helpful to everyone to post their photo, I guess, to their Zoom account, so then your icon will show up while you're speaking. So it would be almost like simulating a video, but with a static photo. I think that might be helpful if that's what you were talking about, being able to place a face to a voice.
Similar to the idea, yeah. Providing that someone could give me instructions on how to do that.
I'll help you, Diane.
Thank you.
Yep. So Molly, if you're going to help Diane, my suspicion is just write it up once and send it to everybody.
Oh, that was Jennifer saying I would help Diane. But if Molly wants to do that, that would be great.
Frankly, I think if you guys should handle this, Diane did approach me about this, and Molly and I are swamped right now.
Okay, yeah.
And so
how about if anyone needs help, I'll help them. Just let me know.
You really want to see my picture on your iPad?
Well, we know you won't anyway, Lenny.
I'll put a picture of my cat on there.
Okay, great.
Okay, Jace. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so
You still there?
just
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to bring up one thing that I had learned about over the past week, or it just caught my attention. Because there was a lot of discussion about a year ago about the Lebanon Street property, and now that it's torn down and everything. And what I was surprised to hear was that they are not running natural gas down 202 this year, and the Maine DOT is going to be paving 202, which will then institute a 5-year moratorium on any excavation in the road, meaning if there was any proposed redevelopment of that site in the next 5 years, there'd be no natural gas. That just
Chase, I didn't
seemed
catch it. Which industry was this that you mentioned?
The natural gas line.
No, I understand the natural gas line, but you said something about the web industry property?
No, Lebanon Street. The
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
yeah, Gendron Lumber.
Got it. Thank you.
And to me, that just seemed like a big deal because with some of the uses or things that we were talking about that site could be used for, they all benefit from natural gas.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of a surprise for me because I thought that the plan was to run natural gas up 202 or that section of the street.
Yep.
There's been a couple of times they've changed their approach, Chase. They're heading to Springville this year, or up that way.
Okay.
Also, Madam Chair, may I make another comment?
Sure.
The last week or so, driving down Jagger Mills, I happened to notice that I believe it was the fire department, put up the big white and red X on the 199 Jagger Mills, the old mill. That was a surprise.
What is it? A big red X?
It's the one where when the firefighters approach the scene, if they're fighting a fire, that they're to battle it from the outside and not go in.
Oh, okay.
Similar to Genron and similar to Benton Trust property.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Anything else before we have a motion to adjourn?
I do have one quick comment.
Yes.
This is in regards to Pepin. What assurances do we have that this is not going to continue on for several more meetings? Because this seems to me this process has been nothing but a series of rebuttals. I mean, I'm not actually hearing answers or solutions to the problems that are being proposed.
I have a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the applicant has now had, over the last 2 meetings, not to count the ones before that, he's had at least 40 minutes to make an overall case. And I would suggest that the next time you begin this, that you do not allow another 20-minute presentation, that you simply pick up the conversation where we left it off. So we'll go to the next topic area. I'll do a brief introduction. You'll give the applicant a couple of minutes to make a statement, and then you'll go into deliberation. And I think that will help speed things up pretty dramatically, because once you guys get into your discussion, I mean, for example, on this topic area, you really, on the first topic area you talked about, you really only spent about 20 minutes talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would speed things up dramatically.
I mean, I think there's an opportunity cost here to the city in terms of, city employees working on this, in terms of the time the taxpayers are paying for. There's an opportunity cost to the city that we're not spending time on other projects. I'm just concerned at how long this has dragged on.
Thank you, Lenny. I appreciate that and agree with you.
I'll rest my peace.
We're gonna certainly push hard. Okay, I guess unless I'm sorry, did I hear someone else chiming in? Must have been background noise. Okay, unless there's anything else, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Diane,
I'll second
seconded.
that.
Everybody's jumping in on that one.
Okay, roll call. Jace.
Definitely.
Diane.
Yes.
Lenny.
Yes, thank you very much.
Jack.
Yes, I'm tired.
Tom.
Yes.
And Jennifer.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.